Hello everyone, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this panel discussion on marriage equality. My name is Pierre-Emmanuel Brusselmans and I am the Belgian Consul General in Mumbai. Before we move to the panel debate itself, I would like to take a few moments to talk about Belgium's stance on this topic. It gives me great pleasure that we in Belgium can look back to our track record with a progressive glimmer. Indeed, we were the second country to allow gay marriage in the world and one of the first to legalize homosexuality. This move has ensured that gay people in Belgium have the same marital, adoption, and anti-discrimination rights as anybody else. This sentiment is even reflected in Belgian society, as my country had one of the first openly gay prime ministers ever, Mr. Elio de Hopo, in 2011. When he was asked by some confrontational journalists if he was gay, he responded, "Yes, so what?" He was the second openly gay man in modern times to lead a government, and the first one to do it or to get this position through an election. It was his belief in the rule of law, one of the tenets of the European Union, which Belgium of course abides by, that guaranteed him that his rights and values, irrespective of his sexual preference or orientation, would be protected. Marriage is a hugely important institution in this country, as it is in Belgium and worldwide. It is a fundamental cornerstone of the organization of our families and societies, and it is available to all of those above 18 who are prepared to take these commitments, except, of course, that is, if you happen to love somebody of the same gender. This simply cannot be right. In 2018, the Supreme Court of India decriminalized homosexuality, which was certainly an important step forward. But unfortunately, same-sex couples are still not being able to marry. For me, extending marriage to same-sex couples is all about how society treats its citizens. We are all equal. It will strengthen, not weaken, this vital institution and help ensure that it remains an essential building block of society. With these few words, I will take my leave, but first I would like to extend my appreciation to the organizers and to the panelists for putting together this much required debate. I look forward to listening to you. Thank you. Enjoy your day.
Hi, my name is Sridhar Rangayan. I'm the Festival Director of Kashish Mumbai International Queer Film Festival, which is having its 12th edition right now. And today we are having this super awesome conversation about marriage equality, what is the way forward. And this particular panel is supported by the Consulate General of the Kingdom of Belgium. We're going to be discussing post the decriminalization of homosexuality in India in 2018, the LGBTQIA community is waiting for the next big step that will recognize not only their identities, but also their partnerships. Same-sex marriage rights are a hot topic being discussed right now in the courtrooms, in the media, on the news channels, and also among members of the LGBTQIA plus community. What can India take from countries that legalize same-sex partnership way back, for example, from Belgium, which became the second country in the world to legalize same-sex marriage after the Netherlands in 2003? Community members, couples from India and Belgium engage in a free-flowing discussion, not only about laws and policies, but basic human emotions that are the bedrock of all relationships. And to do the honors, basically, we have Suresh Ramdas, a very, very well-known activist, equal rights activist, and of course, Mr. Gay India. Thank you, Suresh, for agreeing to moderate the panel. And we have Peter and Sten, a couple from Belgium, but now relocated in Amsterdam. So welcome, Peter and Sten. And I know Sten from China, where I met him at a film festival out there. So welcome to the panel. And we hope to have a conversation about what the marriage rights in Belgium is going to be about. And thank you, David Patronaut, for joining in. He's an eminent scholar who has written and researched a lot about same-sex marriage rights. Thank you, David, for joining in. It's a huge honor and pleasure to have you here. And same thing with Manvendra Singh Goyal, one of the biggest activists from India. He is I think the only out gay prince from India and from the world also, Manav, or in the world. Okay, it's fine. So thank you, Manav, for joining in and wish you best of luck for the shelter home you're building for LGBTQ people. So that's a great way forward. And Parag and Vaibhav, your petitioners for the marriage right bill in the Delhi High Court. So congratulations for that, and I hope we win it, of course. That's left to be seen, but thank you for joining in this particular panel. And Vihan and Rajashree, you're as rock stars. I mean, Vihan is a trans man and he's married already, Rajashree, and we're going to talk about what that marriage rights apply to trans men and how it works out. So thank you, Vihan and Rajashree, for joining in. But for me, this particular panel discussion is really special because I've been living with my partner for 26 years now, and we don't not able to marry each other and have no right over each other's properties or bodies per se. For me, more than property, for me, not having a right over each other's body. If he's ill, then I'm not able to sign up for him at any hospital. For me, that's a big issue. I don't want to actually have this big fat wedding per se. I don't like weddings, like a current your wedding, but I would like to definitely have a legal marriage per se very soon, hopefully. But I'm hopeful because 2018, the Section 377 got repealed, and I just hope that we are on our way to an equal marriage, right? But we're going to discuss that and find out how it all shapes up. Over to you, Suresh Ramdas.
Great. Thank you so much, Sridhar, for that lovely introduction of all our panel. And it's amazing that Kashish is going ahead and hosting this event. I think it's one of those, key and most important conversations also for the LGBTQ plus community people is like, hey, now we've got our rights. Now, now we have partners. What do we really do? Like Sridhar said, even I have a partner for 5 years, and the same difficulties, same issues that Sridhar mentioned, even I have as to how can we really go about, making it a joint, event sort of thing to tell people that, hey, we are together, apart from the fact that, yeah, everybody knows, but then the legality aspect, the insurance aspect, or even basics like joint account as well, how easy it is or how not so easy it is to get one for us as well. So that is what we're going to be discussing here as part of our, marriage equality panel. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into, questions. So first, I'm going to go ahead with Peter. Now, I see, Peter, that you have lived in a lot of places. You have gone to different schools and organizations as well. Like, let me call that out: Belgium, Egypt, right now, Netherlands and China. Right. So you've done a lot of volunteering activities also for the queer and the civil society initiatives that you've done. So my question for you, Peter, is now with you being married, right? And how has life been for you living in these various countries?
Well, we were married in I always have to think actually in 2011. I'm always wrong with the date, which is horrible. And at the time we were I'm originally Dutch, and at the time we were living in Belgium, but before we were living together in China. And the thing there that sort of bothered me is like in a small circle, we were like very free and open and everything. But then outside, it's always like, oh, is this your colleague? Is this your good friend? Is this your whatever? And, so that was bothering me actually. And also before I was living in Egypt, it was always the same thing, like, okay, this is my friend, or people ask you, are you married? And then you say no, and they know enough.
Right.
But for me, I would say, I'm really happy I'm in Holland now. We moved back 2 years ago. So yeah, and here I feel it's totally, nobody asks a question, like when I got a new job here, there were people that were like, oh, you're married, and like, oh, blah, blah, blah. I said, oh yeah, this is my husband. And we're like, oh, how nice for you. So there's no bad thought, I would say. While we were married in Belgium, which was the second country in the world to be able to marry as gay people. But there I always still found myself to be like a little exotic bird, people still like, oh, and you're married and it's to a man and blah, 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 so yeah, so this whole thing of like, I tolerate, I don't go for it. I don't want to be like accepted or whatever. I just want to be respected like everybody else. And this for me was a very important thing. I really wanted to get married. I had to ask Stijn 4 times basically before he said yes. I don't know why. And yeah, for me, it was a celebration of love. And also the thing for me was also important because I'm much older than he is, like, okay, we were living at the time in this apartment. What will happen? Well, like you just,
Mm-hmm.
like a few people already said, like, what will happen if I'm not there anymore? So I wanted also to have like the legal status to be equal to everybody else's and not have any discussion or questions about it. That for me was the most important thing.
All
Yeah.
right, great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I hope after all the 4 times, he's going ahead and making sure that you are completely and very much happy, right?
Well, the wedding was a blast, I can tell you that. It was really nice. So yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful, brilliant. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Now, Stin, now that I know that you are quite difficult, looks like from what Peter is saying, you're quite difficult to give an answer or say yes, but I'm still going to go ahead and, pick on your brains around the fact that, you have done so much of traveling, writing, as what, even your bio says. You've also been in radio and community film festivals, right? So you have a very interesting perspective in the fact that you started discovering your queer identity while you were in China, right? So for me, that is very interesting. So my question to you is going to be, like, as a filmmaker also, how has been your experience in China specific? I know outside it could be a little more easy or difficult, but how was it in China?
Yeah, so just to give like a little bit of a background, I went in 2000, I went to China, and at that time I was already out, like in
Okay.
Belgium, but I hadn't really, like, I don't know, gone out to bars or, like, I don't know, really explored queer life. And that for me happened like really in China. So that is where I really found my queer community. And I mean, in a way, it was, yeah, of course, like, I don't know, very different, because at that time in China, well, you had like a couple of bars, but it was very word of mouth, and the community was small. So, but I mean, in a way, for me, the good thing was that, like, it's immediately kind of gave me a whole perspective on Chinese culture, because like oftentimes when you go to like another country, it's very much like, okay, well, you're from the West and I'm from China and we don't get each other. Whereas now I went into the queer community and it was like, okay, well, we understand each other. Like, even if we come from different cultures, like, I don't know, we know what it's like. We kind of like have that thing in common. And that really made it, I don't know, in a way very, or easier for me to also kind of get to know the Chinese culture. So afterwards, like, well, I basically stayed in China. I lived there for on and off for like 15 years almost. So I did a lot of like queer activism, and with a Chinese friend, we also started like a Chinese LGBTQ organization called Queer Comrades. We made documentaries and webcasts with that, basically to raise awareness in China. Then afterwards, I was also involved with Beijing Queer Film Festival. So did a lot of activism there. I mean, part of the reason why I refused 4 times was that kind of like, well, I don't know, I really want marriage to come all around the world. And it felt like a bit, I don't know, weird to kind of do it. But then, I don't know, the click for me was kind of like, well, if we can do it, then we should do it, you know? Like, I don't know, we should really kind of like make use for that. And I mean, the reactions also from the Chinese friends were really, really nice at that point. Oh, somebody wants to get in the picture, I think. Oh, okay. All right. So yeah, I mean, in the end, I was really, really happy that we did got married, and it was like, I don't know, a big feast of love, and it was very nice. I think in China, like, same-sex marriage just has like a really well, special feel to it in the LGBTQ movement, because I mean, it is something that really lives among the general, well, LGBTQ population, but then also among parents, families, and friends that support LGBTQ. Like, to have that, like, same-sex marriage, that would really kind of symbolize like that LGBTQ is accepted, just because marriage has such an important place like inside of society. You also, like, I don't know, notice it when doing activism. I mean, I think when I was there and doing a lot of activism, I mean, a lot of people said, well, we actually need a lot of other things that are far more urgent than like marriage. It's about like HIV prevention, trans issues, like making sure like gender identities are recognized, like, I mean, mental health, like a lot of things that are very urgent. But then whenever you do something about same-sex marriage, you feel that it's like a movement, and suddenly it's like hundreds of thousands of people are reacting, and you really kind of like feel that this is something that really speaks to like a lot of the LGBTQ people around it, that they really want to kind of push forward. And recently you see it in China, like being done, for example, just last year, there was like a civil code, a new Chinese civil code that was being drafted, and people could like send in their comments and suggestions. And there were more than 200,000 people in China that actually like wrote about the same-sex marriage, and they wanted like the civil code to have same-sex marriage. So it was also like a momentous occasion, because for the first time, the Chinese government acknowledged that these 200,000 comments came, and they actually like, I don't know, said the word same-sex marriage, which in China was already like a huge victory just for the government to acknowledge that. So, I mean, I would say like in that sense, I think a lot of the activists are like, well, it's a bit of a distant dream and we should kind of like keep working on what's really urgent. But then at the same time, like knowing that this is like something that has like real social power and that really can take lots of different parts of the LGBTQ movement with it. So, yes.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Peter and Stijan. Would you talk about, just understanding the perspective, outside the country that you're living in, and living in a completely new place where everybody, I think, knows that it is not a safe space for, voicing out some of your thoughts or opinions. But this is good to know that there has been, a collective Belgium Film Festival where they talk about queer issues and all of that. So I think we are progressing and going in the right direction, and seeing, with the fact that the idea is the fact that you wanted to make sure that you take the opportunity of marriage, get into it. I know that, seeing other queer couples who are not able to get married, yeah, it does feel a little bad, but then, we want that representation as well. Right, so that we can look up and say, hey, yes, there are people who are getting married, who are making sure that, yeah, we can also dream and look forward for that. So thank you for taking that step.
Yeah.
And with these answers,
add one thing?
Yes.
I just wanted to, I mean, I agree with you, there's progression in many parts of the world. I just want to say, like, in Egypt, what I hear, things are getting worse and worse.
Oh.
I mean, when I was living there in the 80s, 90s, you could do whatever you want as long as you didn't talk about it. But repression now is getting worse and worse. So, I mean, even to talk about same-sex marriage is it's like not on people's mind even, because it's too dangerous.
I mean, I would agree that like during these times, and like also even like in Europe with the rise of like the right and properties, I mean, you do realize how important it is to keep on talking about it, and to like, I don't know, do pride and to really be visible, because it's not evidence anymore. Like it was maybe for like a little time in the 2000s where you thought like, okay, well, now everything is going to open up, and now you realize, no, I mean, it's not evident at all, and you should keep on working on it,
Great. I think that nicely and, accurately moves into my next panel person, David. Now, when I read your bio, David, to be honest, I was blown away with the amount of work and research work that you've done, be it with, with, I think, the book, and with information that you've put in around LGBTQ plus activism and making of Europe, a rainbow Europe, quite interested with that. And also around the fact on marriage gay, which was in Belgique, France, and Espanol, right, which is in 2011. So a lot of work that you've done in research. So my question to you is, after all these years of doing research in same-sex marriage, what is it that you want to share with the audience out there in, a snapshot? I mean, how big that is, but we'd like to just hear your views around that.
Okay, maybe I would just start by saying that, can you hear me? Yeah?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, just by saying that I'm not married, although I've been with the same guy for 20 years, this year actually, and I do not plan to marry. So I just say that. And I think there is one reason for that. And the reason why I start with this is that I think much more than love, I mean, historically, marriage and love do not go together. And often marriage kills love, often. But I would like to say marriage, and it was said in the introduction, is really something, I mean, it's very important practically and legally to solve issues. And it has been said already. I mean, we need to keep in mind that certainly in Europe or in the US, it comes from the HIV/AIDS crisis. And it comes from cases of people who were just torn apart because one of the partners died and the other one could not even stay in the same house, that sort of things. And this is how the whole thing started. And secondly, it also came with families, LGBT families, and more with lesbian women, who also needed marriage to be recognized as families. And these are the two things. And then the third thing, and that was said by Stan, among others, is really the issue of borders. It's easier to travel with marriage than with other things, although it's not recognized by all the countries. But it's more recognized than other things like civil partnership, for instance, or other sorts of legal arrangements. And also in Europe, I mean, as you know, it's very hard to come to Europe. In terms of migration, marriages also has a huge impact in terms of access to the territory and to be able to stay in Europe. And these are some of the reasons why I'm not married, in a sense that I have an EU partner, not Belgium, but EU, and I don't have property and I don't have a family. So that's probably the reason why I don't need to marry. But if I say that, I think it's because I think I mean, if you look at the globalization of marriage, I mean, something that has been really impressive, when marriage was approved in the Netherlands in 2000, and the first same-sex weddings happened 20 years ago exactly in Amsterdam, just a few months more than 20 years ago. And then Belgium 2 years later, no one would have expected so many countries to adopt same-sex marriage in 20 years. And I checked this morning, no, it's about 30 countries. So the good news is that these countries are increasingly diverse. It gets from Argentina to Taiwan, South Africa and Belgium. So these countries have nothing in common, which means that if tomorrow India wants to adopt, or China, if they want to adopt same-sex marriage, it's possible. In a sense that you had many theories saying, okay, no, for same-sex marriage, you need that sort of religion or economic condition or demographic conditions or whatever. Actually, what you see today is that these explanations do no longer work, in a sense that you can have same-sex marriage everywhere. And usually you have some sort of legal marriage everywhere as well. I think the key question, and this is what I would like to insist on, is really at the same time, marriage is not the same thing everywhere. Socially, in terms of social recognition, what is the importance of marriage? Well, in some countries, it's not important. Often I say, okay, in Belgium or in the Netherlands, we got marriage because actually no one gets married. And maybe it's when straight people do no longer want to get married that gay people can marry. It's just a question. In other countries, like in the US, marriage is much more central. And it's the same legally. In the US, for lots of things like health insurance, you need to be married. It's not the case in Belgium, for instance, or it's less the case. It's the case for certain things, but much less. So I think it's also important to see what are the effects and what are the rights you cannot access otherwise than by being married. And so the rights that you're denied if you're not married. And then I think that the last question, and I won't take too much time, is really the other thing, and that's a question for activism, is who is actually interested in marriage and who would benefit from marriage? And I think this is a key question that was mentioned partly by Stan by saying, okay, maybe there are more urgent things. It's really what we see, for instance, in Belgium, and that was true in many countries, there were mostly men getting married at the beginning, more men than women. No, it is changing, so it may change in the future. But what does it say about the community? For whom are we fighting for? The same I said, I have no property, so I'm less interested in marriage. So it's also what part of the community is interested potentially in marriage or not. And I will not answer, but I think it's crucial. What you see, for instance, in the US, in many studies, people getting married often are more men and are more middle class and more white. So I think it's also interesting in terms of setting the agenda and to see what happens and also who is interested in getting married. And the final thing is, for instance, you see in Belgium, no one is getting married, neither gay and lesbians. So we have the right, and I think it's crucial to have the right. It's crucial to be able to marry, but then actually in practice, very few people marry, which I think is also an interesting evolution.
Wow, that has got a lot of points and a lot of things going in my head. But I have a question for you with that concept, David. What made you really focus? I'm really intrigued by this also. Like, what made you focus your research and writings around same-sex marriage?
Well, I think one of the key issues, and that was already mentioned, is when I started to think about a PhD, I mean, I wanted to do it on LGBT rights. And one of the main issues on the table was same-sex marriage. And it's how I started. Then I did it in 3 countries, as you said, in Europe. And from there, I moved to it more globally and to look at this conversation globally. Also, just a bit by chance or by coincidence, in a sense that Belgium being the 2nd country, having adopted marriage, that was very good for me, because then I was just asked to comment on what was happening elsewhere, or to tell people what has happened in Belgium and how it happened in Belgium. And maybe a final thing, because that was another question, people were asking how to make the society more open to same-sex marriage. But I would say to get same-sex marriage, the most important thing, you need the votes of a parliament or the votes of judges. And in Belgium, there was absolutely no study about whether the public opinion was in favor of same-sex marriage. And I'm rather sure it wasn't at the time. Okay. In a sense, today you have a majority of people in favor of same-sex marriage, but it wasn't the case in 2001 or 2002, probably. And in other countries where we have numbers, I'm sure that in Brazil or in the United States, the majority is not in favor of same-sex marriage. Still, they have the right. So I think that shouldn't be something stopping people from asking it.
Wonderful. All right, great. So I think, yeah, I mean, you've covered quite a lot with regard to your conversations around it. But I just wanted to also understand, again, because this is, again, we're coming back to India-centric, topics. Now, where do you look at India from a same-sex perspective on your research compared to other countries? From the journey that we have started, be it with September 6, 2018 to, what's happening now. When you compare it to other countries, are we there, not there? Is it progressive? Is it faster? What are your views on that?
Well, I have to say, I know very little about the Indian situation, but from what I know, at least, I mean, it's very quick, but I would say it's not the only country. South Africa, for instance, would be a very interesting case to look at from India, because South Africa was also extremely quick from decriminalization to same-sex marriage. So I think probably it's a very similar trajectory. And it is what I was saying at the beginning, that you don't have one model where, I mean, some Dutch colleagues did years ago a model. You need to go through step 1, step 2, step 3, step 1 being decriminalization, and then you had many steps in between before getting to same-sex marriage. What you see today is that many countries do it differently.
Right.
Or more rapidly. So I think these steps do not longer work, and the trajectory is not the same everywhere. And I think there is space for different countries to invent different trajectories.
Got it. All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much, David, for giving your views. And I'm going to definitely reach out to you to go read all those research material, because I think it's so useful and it will definitely be informative as well. So with that, I'm going to go on to my next speaker, Manvender Singh. Well, I know him personally, very dear friend, and he's doing a lot of amazing work for the LGBTQ+ community, be it with the community center or with this NGO Lakshya Trust. So my question to you, Manvender, is that, yeah, you have met amazing and influential people across the globe. But how difficult is it, for you to get that influence of change, especially for the LGBTQ+ community?
Yeah, thank you, Suresh, for the question. Thanks, Sridhar, for giving me this opportunity. Basically, you're right. I've met many people all over the globe, and thanks to people who have invited me, and I've been on several shows as well. One thing I've noticed is that there is definitely homophobia, there's definitely bigotry, hypocrisies there in all cultures and all societies. I mean, I won't say that there is a single country in the world which is absolutely homophobic free, or there's no bigotry or there's no hypocrisy there, but it's in different levels. I've seen it at different places, and there are a lot of preconceived notions which people carry about us, and on the basis of religion or basis of whatever they have heard or they have seen, or whatever their mindset of is, which prevents people from accepting us and kind of even supporting, and it's led to a lot of homophobia, and basically a lot to do is with hypocrisy. People are not willing to accept the truth, not willing to accept the fact, and that makes it very difficult for people to understand us. So it takes time, but like I'm pretty sure I have seen people change in front of my eyes. I've seen some very, very homophobic people, and I'm talking about India in particular, who have been extremely homophobic, extremely transphobic, and they have changed for the good. And like, I always use this word, educated illiterate, so most of us are highly educated, qualified, but we are illiterate when it comes to issues on LGBTQI+. And also as activists, it's our duty to remove this ignorance from the minds of the people and make them educated literate, in order to help them understand us and help them accept us.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I like the fact that educated illiterate were, and get them on to the other side, which is educated literate. So yeah, I don't know, at times I feel, yes, does education really mess people up, or is it, lack of awareness really does that? Great, Manvinder, but then that really, I'm not going to let you go off because I need to understand and, get an understanding. I know that you've married to DeAndre Richardson, right? And I've met him as well. Amazing personality, lovely, vibrant person who loves wearing different colors. But I just wanted to understand, what are your views on marriage now that you're married to somebody outside and who is from the West? And what are the implications that you have faced personally in India with this marriage?
Yeah, I think I'll answer the second half of the question first. One of the major implication which has happened is due to COVID, we have both been forced to be separated. I mean, he had to leave India in October to 2020, and since then we are not together. He's in America and I'm in India. We can only see each other on virtual calls, or video calls. I cannot touch him, I cannot smell him. I cannot do anything. I mean, I can only see him and I can hear him, which is not at all something which I wanted. When you have got married, when you have decided to spend your whole life with your partner, I have a right to touch him and I have a right to feel him. But unfortunately, I have been denied of that right just because there is no marriage rights in India, and due to the circumstances like these will keep coming. Now we have COVID, tomorrow we'll have something else coming.
Right.
And it will always keep him away from me because of the fact that his marriage with me in India is not recognized. It's not valid. Secondly, I'm always worried for him, because even when he's in India with me, he's absolutely insecure. There is no security for him legally. If you ask me, he is just an American tourist visiting India. That's it. He is, of course, my marriage with him is not recognized, so he cannot be legally called my husband.
Right.
He is not my tenant. He's not my business partner. And so there's he has if something happens to me, he has no other issue, but he will have to just pack his bag and go to America, because there's absolutely no security for him in India. There's because he's just a tourist here. He's on a tourist visa, so he cannot even work in India. He's on a tourist visa, so he cannot do a job. He cannot do anything he wants to do. Cannot employ himself.
Right.
So and every 180 days he has to leave India, because again, tourist visa doesn't allow him to stay in India for more than 180 days. So he has to pack his bag and go out of India, go to Nepal or whichever country he wants to, and then he has to come back. So, this is not the kind of life we would like to live. I mean, we would like to live together. And if India, thanks to people like Parag and Vaibhav who have filed this petition, I'm hoping this petition goes through and we get our rights. It will help so many of us today who are together and want to be together, but because of issues like these, we are not able to secure ourselves. That's it.
All right, great. I mean, virtual hugs, I know it is not easy. I can completely understand the situation you're in, Manvinder, because that's how I was with my partner. So, when the lockdown happened, that we were just not able to be together. Not that we were together before. We did have a long, same city, different place, but, that gap and that touch and that feel and just that hug especially during these tough times are really necessary, and not having that, it does make it a lot more tough. So I totally get that. Thank you so much for sharing your views on marriage and perspective from global aspect. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into our next amazing couple again that I know them personally, Vihan and Rajashri. Welcome. And now I'm going to switch gears, right? Because their marriage was amazing. I was a part of that as well. And it was a nice wedding just between two people, right? Who were in love madly, because very visible as well. But then the I wouldn't say the change. I mean, the twist or the exciting or the interesting part of their marriage was they were from the queer community, and one of them was from the transgender community as well, right? So I'll go directly to you, Vihan. So as a person, right, from the trans community, how do you see marriage in India for the trans people?
Sure. Thanks, Suresh. I think for trans people in India, we view marriage just like everyone else, right? We want to marry for companionship. We want to marry for security, for stability, but above all, as a means for social acceptance, right? From a society that does everything to alienate us otherwise, right? So the interesting fact is that we've known of trans people who've been living authentically since the 1980s in India and are married and have created their own families. But it's just that awareness about transgender people has increased considerably post the 2014 Nalsa judgment by the Supreme Court, right? So the Nalsa judgment legally recognized trans people and their rights in the country. So everything related to trans people started being covered quite often by the media and brought to public awareness post 2014. So you may have noticed that only in the last 5 to 6 years, we have increasingly read about trans people getting married, right? But this has always been there in India, just that the public didn't know about it. Personally, when Rajshri and I decided to get married, she was not keen on a heteronormative wedding ceremony, but simply wanted to register our wedding, right? But I wanted to celebrate our wedding as a reclamation of practices that have long been dominated by cisgender people, right? So more than anything, I knew that my wedding would give hope to a lot of trans people who have the same dreams as mine, who live in despair, wondering whether they would ever have a partner, they would ever have a marriage, or whether they'd ever have a family, right? So I viewed my wedding as an act of normalizing trans lives. And to a great extent, it has helped innumerable trans men in getting acceptance from their families, who often do not support them, fearing, I mean, a lot of families fear what their trans children's life would be, what would their future be, right? So they saw every time they use my video, there's a short documentary about my life. They use my wedding video. They show it to their parents when they come out, saying, if this guy can do it, so can I, right? I can lead a life with dignity and respect. And that has helped a lot of people get acceptance from their families. So that was the message that I wanted to give through our wedding, right? Now, with that said, I would just like to highlight the flaws in India's heterosexual marriage acts that have often been used to target transgender people and continue to harm us, right? Firstly, these marriage acts are built upon the premise of creating families, which means having children is a core factor which governs the validity of a marriage, right? So this is substantiated by the clause which allows a person to seek an annulment on the grounds that their partner is important. Unfortunately, this is often used as a weapon against trans people who enter heterosexual marriages, right? So we've witnessed numerous cases in the past where cisgender people who either under the pressure of their families or otherwise have turned against their transgender partners and have accused them of deceiving them by hiding their gender identity or not being able to give them children, right? And this has even resulted in trans people ending their lives out of shame, out of rejection, or just out of mere heartbreak, right? Such was the case of Akshay, a trans man from Tamil Nadu, who died by suicide in 2018 after his wife accused him of cheating her by hiding his trans identity. But they were in a relationship for 5-6 years before their wedding, and everyone around, who associated with them knew that she was well aware of his gender identity and chose to marry him, right? So while we continue efforts in seeking same-sex marriage rights in India, we should also look at how we can approach this legislation to be gender inclusive, redefining, the emphasis and construct of family, right? Secondly, while civil union partnerships present a better structure, both for heterosexual and homosexual couples, for this to become a reality in India will take a long time, right? And the current marriage acts are increasingly relied upon for various legal and social benefits like inheritance, like, medical protection, whether it's insurance, like housing, adoption, etc., right? And which are crucial for all people, regardless of your sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression. So although I increasingly see a lot of LGBT people with some amount of privilege seeking these benefits compared to others for whom this might not be a priority right now, either way, the focus should be on bringing in legislation that is gender agnostic and does not replicate the same cis heteronormative social contracts and systems. Only then it will benefit any person, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression.
Wow, great. Amazing, Vihan. As always, it's really nice to hear. And, but it's also, you've been a role model to so many of the people from the trans community to, like what you said, give them that hope, give them that, something to dream of, saying that, yes, even I can want it, and even telling parents. I think that's even more important and crucial. So, for me, I think it's really amazing, as I know you personally as well, and you've been doing so much work for the community. Now, I'm just going to turn it off to Rajashri again now, with this fact that you have a loving husband is going ahead and helping you and supporting you and driving a lot of these big initiatives and conversations in the LGBTQ+ community. Now, we know that marriage is so patriarchal in India, right? Can you just kind of, share your journey since the marriage? How has it been? What are the things that people have been posing questions, especially knowing the fact that, Vihan is a trans man. So how, can you, just share your journey on that, please?
Sure. I would say that I'm really privileged. I've had a family who's been accepting of my bisexual identity. So I didn't have trouble convincing other people. I don't care about what others said. Never have. Personally, I had never really thought of being married. The idea seemed okay to me only when I really got to know Vihan. Unfortunately, in the society we live in, marriage is considered the highest form of commitment, right? And it is the only way, like others said, it also provides certain benefits such as social acceptance, be it in housing, healthcare, property, and inheritance rights, etc. But more than anything, for me, as an openly, as an openly out trans person, I understood, that for Vihan, having a wedding was a public message that he was sending to people, that trans people can also have partners and relationships that form out of it. I mean, I was also sure that as a couple that we were able to negotiate our own terms of what our marriage will look like. Right? As a queer couple, we are very particular of not being boggled down by the pressures that heteronormative marriage structures impose.
Right.
Whether it is gender roles or acknowledging and respecting that each of us have an individual life as well, we've always been mindful of to not be affected by what others expect of us. Right? However, this is not the case for all trans people. As someone who engages with partners of trans men, I have noticed that pressures of performing toxic masculinity affects trans men immensely, which in turn burdens their relationship. At the same time, cisgender partners of trans men as well abuse their relationship by imposing patriarchal expectations of what masculinity means, right? So they often use this to invalidate their trans partners and their gender. So if you're asking me if being married to a trans man is better than being married to a cis man, I think I would say that it depends on the person and not their gender. Right. We are all byproducts of a patriarchal society. Therefore, it will take a conscious effort from all of us, regardless of gender, to redefine our spaces and break free from the binds of patriarchy in relationships within or outside the institution of marriage. I've known a lot of couples who are not married but reproduce this heteronormative structures, you know, and the toxicity that comes with it. For instance, I know, like, my parents are not married, but it did, like, my father did expect things that, you know, that the society demands from their partners. So whether they were married or not, it did bring out a lot of toxicity. So I've known that. So something other than, I mean, something I would like to say here that I benefited out of marrying a trans person are the relationships that I gained from Vihan's transgender family, right?
Yeah.
So this is a family that is not bound by blood or what society expects them. There are no strings attached, right? It's only based on shared experiences and love.
Yeah. So I think we have three families now, right? So one out of our biological families, and one is a chosen family, where to Rajshree's point, there's no string attached. So with biological families, that's a thing, right? So by the strings attached by property or inheritance, right? So just by the burden of being related by blood, you have to put up with your biological
dowry.
Family. Yeah, dowry, all of that. But with chosen families, you're just attached by love, by our shared experiences, and each and see, I have my biological family support, but I still have a trans family, a chosen family, because, and I chose to have it, right? Because we share the same experiences, we share the same, a lot of our journeys are the same. So Rajshree, it's a pleasure, it's such a joy to see Rajshree interacting with each of them calling her sister-in-law, right? Referring to her as their sister-in-law, and just the bond that gets formed by from that, it's just something lovely. And I think that's something each person should have, regardless of whether you are part of the trans community or not. You need to see how you can form these bonds with people just by, and make them your chosen family with no strings attached.
Great. I know. I mean, it's all that you want is somebody to hold you, accept you, acknowledge, and then, you know, love you unconditionally for whoever you are. And yes, you know, with the strings attached, it does come with a lot of other attachments as well, you know, but with the ones that you choose as a chosen family, it's really beautiful. So once again, thank you so much, Vihan and Rajshree, for sharing your views. Now, with that, I'm just going to go dive right into these two amazing people. Now, Parag and Weber, yeah, they live in New York, I think, but very much have their heart in India, because they are these two amazing plaintiffs in the landmark court case, you know, before the Delhi High Court, wherein they're talking about legalizing same-sex marriage for, I would say, the largest democracy, and that is India. Just a little bit around, I had the wonderful opportunity to meet both of them during, I think, the Desi, you know, webinar that was hosted by, I keep forgetting a name also, Anupam. Sorry?
see rainbow parents and allies.
Yes, yes, that's where I met them and interacted with them and got to know, my God, it's such a beautiful story and a journey. And I saw the video, all crying my heart out, hoping, yes, I wish I can have this as well, but should I go outside India to have this, or can I have this in India? And now that seems to be coming into some sort of reality with the fight that they're doing. So my question directly to you, Parag, is that, can you share, again, if it's not confidential, can you share some of those key aspects of your legal battle, for the same-sex marriage rights in India?
Yeah, thank you, Suresh, for that kind introduction. I want to say we're so honored to be on this panel, but I also want to especially call out Prince Manvendra, Vihan, and Rajashri for recentering this conversation, not on legal arguments or benefits or property, but on what's really at stake here, which is our right to be, our right to love, and the fundamental dignity that we deserve as human beings. I hear this argument a lot that, is this the right fight, right? Aren't there bigger battles for us to fight? People are being murdered in countries for being LGBTQ. People are being discriminated against. Of course, we have to fight on all of those fronts. But what we have to do is we have to get out of the scarcity mentality of colonialism and patriarchy. Because colonialism taught us that there's only enough for a few and the rest of us have to fight for scraps. Right. And when we within our own community say, well, fighting for gay marriage is a middle class thing, or it's a thing for cisgender people, or it's a male thing, then we're buying into this argument that we can't be allies to one another. And so I really appreciate what Vihan said, which is that as much as this is an issue for couples like Vaibhav and me, it's an issue for transgender couples as well. We can all fight together. We can all lift up each other together. And the net result is that we normalize our lives, all of our lives, for the whole of society. The reason why Vaibhav and I chose to fight this battle, we've been together for 9 years. We knew we were meant to be together within a few months. And probably about 2 years into our relationship, my father called his father. And I have a recording of the conversation. My dad actually taped it to play it for me later because he knew I'd ask a million questions. And he said to Vaibhav's father that if Parag and Vaibhav were a boy and a girl, we would never have allowed this to go on this long without formalizing what the relationship is. Because at least in our culture, so much of how we relate to one another is based on that marital relationship. So put aside the legal piece for a second, we relate to each other based on our marriages. So when I travel to India and I spend so much time with his uncles, his aunts, his cousins, his nieces and nephews, they call me Parag Chacha. They treat me as a damad in their family. Otherwise, without that marital relationship, it's like ham aapke hai kaun, right? Who am I to you? What is my relationship in the society? So we got married in 2017. We did the legal marriage. Just like Vihan and Rajashri, we also decided to have a big fat Indian wedding. In part, it was because we actually liked the wedding ceremony. We liked the idea of bringing friends and family together, but also because we knew that the net impact of that wedding would be that 500 people would leave that weekend and go back to wherever they were from changed. They would have had an experience that most of them had never had before, and they would talk about it. And what we didn't expect is that the video of that wedding, and particularly the video of my father's wedding toast, would go viral, and now more than 30 million people have watched it. And just like with your videos, Vihan and Rajashri, people have messaged us and saying, when we come out to our family, we play your dad's video. They've translated into Spanish and into Mandarin and into Tagalog. So that is the impact of having these very public declarations of love. In 2019, in 2020, right before New York City went down into lockdown, we went to the Indian consulate to register our marriage, which is a right that we have under the Foreign Marriage Act of India, which was passed in 1969. That law says that a marriage in another country is recognized as a marriage in India, because of course you wouldn't want to have a situation where people who are from India, like Vaibhav, who's an Indian citizen, they travel abroad for study or for work, they get married, and then they have to redo their marriage in India. It's basic contract law. So we're not asking the government to make new laws, we're asking them to respect the existing law that's been around since 1969. When the consulate refused to register our marriage, we asked them to perform our marriage. They refused to do that as well. So I went to the senior consular officer and I looked him directly in the eye and I said, are you denying us because we're a same-sex couple? And he said, yes. And that was a really hard moment for me because this was in Midtown Manhattan. in the world's greatest democracy, in a place that had legalized marriage equality 5 years earlier. And I was being denied this right because India's protocols have not yet caught up to society. And so we made the decision then to join a number of other couples in the Delhi High Court, in the Kerala High Court, and others who are now filing petitions to try and bring this case before the Supreme Court. Our case is under the Foreign Marriage Act. There is a lesbian couple fighting with us under the Special Marriage Act. There are other couples fighting under the Hindu Marriage Act. We are fighting this battle on all fronts because we realize that the end result has to be that the Supreme Court has to make a decision. Is India's democracy going to be an inclusive democracy or an exclusive one? And if we're going to be an inclusive democracy, then we have to grant equal rights under the law to all people.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing some of those nice details. I'm always wanting to know what's next, what's happening. I know they've stalled it. I think they've kind of wanting to review. And when are the next dates, Weber?
So the next date, Suresh, is on August 26th. So what the government is doing right now is basically using delayed tactics. So whenever, we are in the courtroom, it's a virtual courtroom. And, we are up at 1 in the morning here and, so excited. And it just takes about 5 minutes. The government lawyer would come and say, oh, there are more pressing issues, Your Honor, that we need to be taken care of. These are like, not important issues at all. And our lawyers are screaming on top of their voices like, there are millions of LGBTQ people in India, who actually are affected by these laws. So you have to listen to it. It is an urgent issue. But the government, every time they'll say something and, would want to delay it. Sometimes they say, oh, we haven't filed a query. So it has been going on. We started in October. That was the first hearing, but we really haven't had a real hearing. So the next date is August 26th. So fingers crossed.
But that's how you know that they're on the side of wrong, right? Because when you don't have law or justice on your side, delay is your only tactic. So let them keep delaying, but justice delayed will not be justice denied.
Correct. Right. Thank you so much, Parag, for that wonderful information. And I know I kind of pulled you in, Weber, because my next leading question was, with all this that you're doing with, Parag, now what are your views around the LGBTQ plus community in India, and especially around marriage?
Yeah, good question. So for me, Suresh, it has definitely, what I've seen is change. When I left India at age 26, it was 2011, August of 2011.
Right.
So when I left, India, I left as a very terrified kid. I was closeted. I was worried. I have faced harassment in India. I remember walking around in Delhi, sort of dating a guy, holding hands, but being harassed by the police and, being asked for money, for sexual favors. So it was really, really, disgusting, the time that I spent, when I was in India. But when I moved to the US, I promised myself, and, to our other couples as an example here, when I moved to the US, people didn't care. I mean, I was like, I'm going to be honest to everybody. I'm going to, let everybody know that I'm gay. And if they ask me, I'm going to be like, yeah, I date men. But nobody actually cared. But in these last 10 years, what I have seen is progress, an immense amount of progress. I've seen activists, speaking vocal, so much, they're being so much more vocal. I see people like Mana, people like you. I see Sridhar, going out there. Media is playing such a huge role. I was just thinking about, Sridhar's movie, Evening Shadows. I was flying back home to India and, Emirates had his movie on the plane. And I was shocked. This is a, Muslim majority country's, national air carrier having an LGBTQ, movie under Bollywood. So that in itself, just showed the amount of progress they've had. And, there are so many other examples, my friends in itself, are now activists. If they see injustice anywhere, not just gay people, but straight people, if they see injustice, they will speak up and they don't hesitate. When Parag and I got married, like you mentioned, we got thousands of, messages, positive messages. But, if somebody would post like a video, Suresh, and, we would see comments, there were some really violent, vicious comments also coming out there.
True,
one rule that everybody had taught me was, do not look at the comments. If you look at the comments, if you read...
I told him that. I said, don't read the comments. And what did he do? He read all of them.
I didn't read. I couldn't help myself because I was just, again, coming to this place where we're like, we're not really sure what people think of this. Yeah. So it was so disheartening to see that. But what was heartening was Desi kids, you know, actually fighting those who were actually, you know, writing those vile messages. You know, I was so tempted. I'm like, I'm going to respond to some of these. This is not correct. This is, you know, so misrepresented. I didn't have to. Indian activists, Indian kids themselves would actually just jump into the conversation, you know, school, you know, homophobes and bigots. So it's just been fantastic. But I also, on the question of marriage, I do understand that marriage is not for everyone. To David's point, it's very well taken. I think in India, people definitely need to understand that marriage equality does not mean everybody needs to get married. Marriage equality basically means everybody has a right to get married. You don't have to get married, but if you want to get married, it should be as simple as that. And I know, like, you know, I've been on forums at Parag where people have been, you know, very clear that they're like, you know, there are other pressing issues. There are, you know, trans rights are, you know, under threat constantly. What are we doing around that? So to Parag's point, we constantly need to fight these battles, but we can fight them together. We don't have to segregate one issue from other. We can definitely fight them together. So in my view, I think I believe in the institution of marriage, Parag believes in the institution of marriage, and we want to do this because we definitely want recognition. And for our families personally, I think it went a long way. When we did a, you know, religious ceremony, they understood, they took our relationship more seriously. So why not do it in a civil manner as well?
Great, wonderful. I mean, for me, I'm kind of like, yeah, I think I can go around cheering and, you know, talk to my boyfriend now and say that, yeah, there is hope and there is an opportunity now that, you know, we have Vaibhav and Parag fighting for it, and then we have visibility in form of Vihan and Rajshri, and also we have Manvinder and DeAndre out there. So there is so much of hope, and obviously Sridhar and Sagar also out there who've been there, and though no marriage happening, but then we have that hope that, you know, it is going to happen. So with this amazing conversation that we had, I'm just going to ask each one of you all to keep it short and sweet, just 1 or 2 sentences on the fact that what are your reflections on same-sex marriage after this wonderful and, you know, energizing conversation we had. So I'm going to go back and start again. Hey, so Peter, what do you think in 2 sentences?
What do I think? Well, what do I think? Well, I think the most important thing is to have, for me, to have that right. Like so many people say, well, you don't have to. I mean, there are things that I think like are like, it's not for me, but it's good that people should have the right and have the choice.
Great, thank you. Sujin?
Yes, well, for me, it's also about something that Parag said really touched me, is what he's thinking in terms of like abundance. So like there are like all these different issues, but it's about like combining them and like reaching them together. And yeah, I was also thinking at some point, yeah, in China as well, there's also been this kind of like fight against this marriage institution controlling people's life. Like you have to get married before that age. So, I mean, it's also about kind of like giving a new feel to the marriage institution as such. And I think like all of these kind of battles, it's really about like not excluding one from the other, but finding ways to combine them. So I take this and many other things from the conversation.
Perfect, thank you. So next time, Peter, you're going to ask Sujin to renew your vows. I think you're not going to have to say 4 times. It's going to come immediately. Or maybe it's going to come the other way around, right?
Who knows?
All right, so with that, David, what are your views?
I would just like to say thank you first, especially, I mean, it was very inspiring to listen to all of you. And just also to say, I think that, I mean, the same-sex marriage in India, as it did in many other places, is both changing marriage, which I think is something always useful, and changing society at the same time.
Thank you, great. I hope that has changed somehow the view on marriage from for you, David. Great. All right. So, Manvinder, what are your views?
Well, I want to say that it's said that marriages are made in heaven, and I'm very positive that we will definitely see heaven in India with marriage equality getting accepted, and we will definitely win, and I'm very optimistic about it.
Perfect. And then finally, you will make sure that DeAndre is not stepping out of India, and he is going to be very much in Rajpipla with you and traveling around. So great, wonderful. Vihan and Rajshri, your views.
I just like to reiterate what I said earlier, right? Like marriage is, I mean, without it being said, it should be an equal right? But I think we should look at bettering it and not replicate the same cis heteronormative social contracts, right? And so what can we do to break patriarchy? What can we, how can we look to better it? And I think that's where people, we can bring in that extra insight. So that's where we can play a role and make sure that we're bringing in a different social structure in how we and reinforce what it means to be a family. And it's not always procreation.
Yes, perfect. Rajshri?
I think we should fight all fights together, and it should happen parallelly.
Perfect, great. Thank you so much, both of you all. I'm just waiting for you all to come down to Bangalore so where we can, have a great conversation and have a great time, right? So with that, Vaibhav and Parag, your views.
Yeah, I'll just share two thoughts. One is I think that the opportunity here is tremendous. Peter and Stijan mentioned that that Netherlands was the first country in the world to legalize same-sex marriage. It's been 20 years since that happened. In that time, 30 countries around the world have legalized same-sex marriage. You can now find marriage equality on every single continent on the planet, including Antarctica, by the way, Taiwan in Asia, South Africa. There are currently 1.2 billion people around the world who live in a country with marriage equality. If we win these cases in India, we could more than double that number. So the opportunity is tremendous. And the last thing I want to say is to Prince Manvendra and to Sridhar, you talked, Prince Manvendra, about us fighting this battle for you. You and Sridhar have fought so many battles for us. I think about seeing you on national television coming out. I think about seeing Purple Skies and Evening Shadows. You fought for us. It's our turn to fight for you. And together we'll keep fighting for the success of generations.
Perfect. Wonderful. Great. Yes.
And I would just add, I was thinking about, during this conversation, I was thinking about how in 2015, when marriage equality came to the US, it came in the evening. There was a Supreme Court judgment, and President Obama had, asked the White House staff to illuminate the entire, building with pride colors. Right. So I remember going there, thousands of people gathering there and cheering, and it was so exciting. And I looked at Parag and I said, do you think Rashtrapati Bhavan, the presidential palace in India, could ever be up like this? He said, we'll make it happen. So I think that's what we're trying to do, and we hope we succeed.
Wonderful, great. Thank you so much for joining in and having such an engaging conversation. Really appreciate you all putting your views out there and giving hope to many out there who are going to be watching this discussion. And I mean, for me, I'm just having a little bit of goosebump moment, and I'm energized as well, saying that, you know what, we all need to be out there and we need to do our best to do for this community to, just be accepted and have all the rights. So with that, thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. And I hand it back to Sridhar.
Thank you. This has been such a beautiful conversation and beautiful journeys of so many journeys of people who have been navigating this for so many years in different countries. So thank you for this beautiful conversation, and thanks to Consulate General of the Kingdom of Belgium for supporting this particular panel discussion. And thank you, David and Sten and Peter, for joining this from the Belgium side and speaking about your own experiences. And thank you, Manvendra Singh Goel and Parag and Vaibhav and Vihan and Rajeshri for sharing your beautiful thoughts. This panel is a stellar panel, and I hope that more and more people will watch this Q&A. And thank you, of course, Suresh. You are a stellar moderator, and you moderated a panel last year too. So thank you for agreeing to moderate this year too. And I hope that next year we are not going to be online. We're going to be at the Kashish Film Festival at the Liberty Cinema, where we hold every year. I just hope that will happen very soon. If any of you are watching this conversation, if you have any questions for Suresh, Peter and Sten, Manvendra, David, Parag and Vaibhav, or Vihan and Rajeshri, please put it in the comment box. Don't roll, put positive comments right here, or ask questions if you have any questions, and I'll make sure they see this and answer this particular thing. And With that, thank you. All of you, please join at the award ceremony on September 5th, where we're going to announce the winners of the competition categories. But we also have beautiful performances by community members and non-community members. So please do join in on the award ceremony. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.